Welcome, Joseph Sobel.
Thanks, Steph.
Finn.
Sorry, here's secret identity. That's like calling Superman, sorry, Clark. Just don't do that at Aslan. Well, about a little more than a year ago today, I became an orphan. It was about time, happens to all of us. And I was luckier than most. I walked into the hospice facility down in South Asheville called Solace. Now, if any of you are planning on dying in Asheville, I'd say you're in luck, because it's a beautiful place to go. Lots of windows, attentive staff. I walked into the room, my dad was lying in the bed. I said, "Dad, it's my birthday. 55 years we've been together on this planet. Never thought we'd make it this long. Pretty good, huh?" And Dad looked up at me and he said, "It's your birthday. Oh my goodness." And then he closed his eyes for a while, and then he opened them again a little while later, and he said the last intelligible words that he said on this earth, as far as I know. He said, "The game is over." That was my dad. Well, Dad had done really well, all in all, with having terminal bladder cancer. Until around February, they put the catheter in. And then he lost his mind. Which kind of makes you wonder, where is the mind exactly? I was with him when he got the diagnosis in the urologist's office. You know, they had done a cystoscopy, which means they put a video camera somewhere they really shouldn't put a video camera. And the doctor came in and he sat down, and as is their wont in these situations, he said, "Well, I've got some good news and some not so good news." Okay, good news first. We found 4 cancers in the bladder. 3 of them were superficial, and we were able to remove them with clear margins. Oh, good. What about the 4th? Well, that's the not so good news, see. That one went through the wall of the bladder into the muscle, and that means that the only real treatment for that is to remove the entire bladder, and that means we'll have to make a stoma out of a section of your intestine, and we'll have to vent it through your abdominal wall. Dad said that means I have to wear a bag. Doctor said, yes, that's what it means, a bag. Now, Dad was a fastidious man. He lived a fastidious life. He was 87, or going on 87. He had chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. He had congestive heart failure. He had very bad arthritis up and down his spine, which made life a burden. And he said he was also a secular 20th century Jew, which means that God was not on his throne. And the only thing in its place, you know, closest to that, was cleanliness. So it came down to the choice between death and wearing a bag of urine strapped to your side. The choice, it was just no contest. Death in a knockout. So Dad said, well, he explained his circumstances. He said to the doctor, "What are my chances of dying with this disease rather than dying of it?" The doctor said, "Well, I don't really know. I'm not God," which is good in the circumstances. Said, "But in my experience, it's a matter of months more than years." And we sat there and we took that in, and we sort of went through trying to fit that into our schedules. And then Dad said, "Well, one more question, doctor." He said, "What is this going to do for my sex life?" Doctor said, "Well, I don't know." Dad said, "Not with her." I mean, he pointed to his 74-year-old girlfriend there, sitting there. And he said, "No, we don't do anything, but I still like to please myself." Doctor said, "Well, that's entirely up to you," which I guess is the whole point. And it was a good answer, too, because Dad really needed something at that moment that was entirely up to him. We interviewed him twice for our Cancer Stories project. Up at ETSU, we're interviewing cancer patients to get their take on the medical system and how it feels, the kind of existential experience of cancer. And Dad was extremely eloquent and forceful. The first interview was back in July when the diagnosis was fresh. And Dad, he was sort of fueled in his whole life by righteous indignation. He may not have believed in God, but that didn't mean he still couldn't argue with him constantly about the way he ran the world. And doctors were a nice surrogate for that. And so dealing with doctors gave him all kinds of inspiration. And he told some great stories. But by December, that fuel had mostly run out. His girlfriend took him to MD Anderson, the best cancer hospital in the world, and he fought his way out. Like the Battle of Mindanao. He just didn't want to be there. He wanted to be home, sitting in his garden, watching the rose bushes and saying a long goodbye. And sure enough, by December, it was clear we weren't going to see another Christmas together. February, the home health nurse put in the catheter, and then it slowly began to escape him what was going on. His mind and body just began to separate and go their different ways. And since his mind had always been so strong, it was very difficult to argue with him. He'd say, they say I have cancer, but they don't give me any proof. How do I believe them? I came there to the house. He was sitting in the den, going through the nurse's logbook, saying, I don't see any proof here. Where does it say I have cancer? I said, Dad, I brought the video of us talking with you and you talking about cancer. Would you like to see that? Sure. So we popped him in the DVD player, and he watched himself on the screen talking eloquently and movingly about life and death and cancer, and he was fascinated. He sat there staring at himself, saying, "Can you believe this? This is the damnedest thing I ever saw." He said, "Did you know about this?" I said, "Yeah, Dad, I was there. Not only that, so are you." He said, "Well, if I've already committed suicide, what does it even matter?" Well, he went to hospice for a short get-acquainted stay, and then he was going to come back and spend his last days at home. But that fell apart in about 2 weeks. He started firing the home nursing staff every time he could, every chance he could get. You know, "You're fired, you're fired, you're fired. Why should I listen to you? What, are you a doctor? I have a PhD," he said, "in psychology, with a diplomate from the state of New York, and I'm supposed to listen to you. You're fired." And then he started calling the police, saying he was being held under house arrest, and would they please come and fix this? The police would come, Gretel would explain, and then John, the very patient social worker, would arrive in his great big red pickup truck and carry Dad back to hospice to cool out. The last time this happened was for good. And I was on my way down there to see him in solace, and I started getting calls on the cell phone. "Hurry, hurry, your father's out of control. He's completely agitated. We need you." I'm going as fast as I can. Pulled into the parking lot, ran through the glass doors, down the hall, past the nursing station. "How is he?" "Oh, he's fine." "Fine? What do you mean fine?" "Oh, somebody turned on a religious broadcasting station and it just chilled him right out." I said, "Albert Sobel, room 118. You're talking about a man who spent his whole life as a militant proselytizing agnostic. What are you talking about?" He said, No, he's fine." So I ran down the hall, and sure enough, in the corner up by the ceiling, there was the TV set, and it was playing the John Hagee Cornerstone Pentecostal Easter service. It was the Saturday evening right before Easter, and they were batting each other with palm fronds, and Dad was saying, "Can you believe this? This is the damnedest thing I ever saw. Did you know about this?" "No, Dad, I didn't know about this, but I think we need to talk." He said, "Wait a minute, wait just a minute." He was writing down the donations number with a borrowed pen on the top of an empty Kleenex box. And I thought, well, there goes my small bequest. But if it makes him happy, what the hell? And sure enough, he said, "No, don't worry, I'm going to finish this, and then we'll turn off the TV, and I'll be with you." And he said, "And I'll never leave you." And I said, "Whoa, I didn't know about that." But he finished, and thank God it was entirely illegible. And they turned the TV off. And Dad turned to me, and in his best, well, let's just fix this kind of tone, as in days of old, he said, "So, what am I doing here?" I said, "Dad, you have cancer. It's not curable." He said, "Well, where is this?" I said, "This is the hospice. This is Solace down in South Asheville." He said, well, why don't I just go home? I said, well, we tried that, Dad, but you kept on firing the nursing staff, and then you'd call the police, and Gretel would have to explain. He said, I did? Why did I do that? I said, I don't know. He said, well, that must have been awful for her. I said, it was. He said, give me the phone. I said, for what? He said, I got to call Gretel. So I dialed for him and handed him the phone. He said, darling, I'm so sorry. I know I must have put you through hell. Will you come down? And whew, she was there like that. And we both sat on the edge of the bed and we looked at each other. And Gretel and I looked at each other. And Dad said, well, let's just go to a real medical center and we'll, like Duke, you take me down to Duke and we'll just fix this. And Gretel looked at me like, it's your turn. So I said, Dad, she tried that. She took you to Anderson. You fought your way out. You didn't want it. Now here you are. He said, well, what do we do? I said, well, we just continue on the path that you decided to take. He said, what's that? I said, it's called palliative care. He said, what's that? I said, it's just making you as comfortable as we can for as long as it lasts. He looked at Gretel. She nodded. He looked back at me. And he said, so when did you become such a mensch? And that's as close as we came to absolution. And from that time on, Dad just set his face to the west and peacefully sailed away.